Lord Cashman.
I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, Uganda's Anti-Homosexuality Act has increased violence and discrimination against LGBT plus people. The UK has made its opposition clear to all levels of the Ugandan government. On the 3rd of April, the Ugandan Constitutional Court struck down some provisions. However, the legislation remains, including the death penalty for so-called aggravated homosexuality. The Deputy Foreign Secretary met the Ugandan Justice Minister on the 3rd of April, underlining the importance of ensuring people are free from persecution, regardless of sexuality, and stressing our concern at this legislation.
My Lords, I congratulate the Government on the action that it has taken so far, but it can and must do more. The Ugandan law criminalises those who even supply services to LGBT people, and as the Minister said, there is aggravated homosexuality faces the death penalty, 20 years in prison for merely being homosexual. The situation is dire and worsening. Arrests, people going into hiding, blackmail and service providers closing. Therefore, I ask the Government to mirror the actions taken by the United States, Canada and the World Bank. Targeted individual named sanctions, access individual assets held in the UK, and an immediate pause on development support which could be used by discriminatory actors. And finally, my Lords, to call upon Uganda to end implementing the law with forced anal examinations. Such barbaric human rights abuses must be vigorously denounced.
Well, I'd start with the last point. I entirely agree with the Noble Lord, and I thank him for all the work he's done on this and many other related issues. This is an appalling situation for minorities in Uganda, and is part of a pattern that we are seeing, unfortunately, across many sub-Saharan African countries. The UK, nobody in Africa can be under any, no one in Uganda can be under any illusions about the UK's position on this. Every level of government have raised this. We will continue to do so. We don't discuss openly what plans we have in terms of sanctions, but we will look at all alternatives, that all opportunities we can to continue to raise this and make sure that the government of Uganda, the Parliament of Uganda, and those proposing this legislation understand how devastating this is and how what an enormous damage has been done to Uganda's reputation in the world, and I'll continue to work with him and others to make sure that we are taking every action we can.
My Lords, I entirely support entirely what Lord Cashman has just said about Uganda.
Vote.
My Lords, will the Minister not agree that one thing that could make a really big difference to this appalling situation would be a change in regime and free and fair elections? He will have noted that the European Parliament concluded that the last elections were neither free nor fair and in fact were violent. And what more can we do to ensure there is this multi-party democracy? And will he find time to meet the outstanding new leader of the opposition, Joel Sessegnoni, who is a brave young politician who deserves our support?
I thank my noble friend. I would just say that we will work with any government of Uganda. They are important allies, they're members of the Commonwealth, they are doing important work elsewhere in Africa for peace and security. But it is only through having a good, friendly relationship with a country like that we can state how appalled we are at legislation such as this. And so, obviously, we want to promote free and fair elections at every stage, but the government of Uganda is the government of Uganda. They are doing great things in support of peace and security in Africa, and we support that. But this is an unacceptable regression of freedoms and personal rights.
It's not only the voice of government that needs to be heard, it's the voice of civil society. And I've welcomed the government's contribution in the past to the Commonwealth Equality Network. but we can do more, making sure faith voices are heard, making sure trade union voices. What is his department doing, working with the international trade union movement, who have very good policies on this, to influence people in those countries? So it's not just seen as a UK government action, but it's a civil society action that can be appalled at these laws.
I think I can reassure the Noble Lord. I met with our High Commissioner to Uganda this week, and she gave me details of many of the projects we are doing with civil society, with organisation, and some of our overseas development assistance money goes, for example, funding grassroots efforts to shift attitudes on gender-based violence, and there are many other things that we are doing. And he's right that many faith-based organisations are key to this. One of the unfortunate drivers of this legislation has been promoted by an evangelical view of Christianity, and not one that many of us who would ascribe to Christian values being one of compassion and kindness. But it seems to be one of quite the reverse. And I know that many faith-based organisations want to have nothing to do with that and want to try and correct that. And we will work with anybody who is seeking to support people affected by this legislation.
On a visit to Kampala before the pandemic, I met with the leadership of the Anglican community because my visit was about the abolition of the death penalty, and they said that they would support my work on the death penalty as long as I didn't campaign on LGBT rights. And now we have the death penalty supported by that community there. I'm grateful that Lambeth Palace has disassociated itself from that. But will the Minister agree with me that the development partnership agreement that the UK has with Uganda, which includes, I quote, "We will also use a full range of tools to defend democratic norms and the rights of excluded groups, for example, the LGBT plus community," is no longer operable because those groups that we have been supporting now face the very criminal penalties that the Noble Lord Cashman had indicated. Will the Minister further agree with me that our relationship with Uganda cannot continue as it has? We need a formal review of our development relationship, and we do need to state to the Government of Uganda that our view of the Commonwealth Charter, their act is inconsistent with this. We cannot carry on as we have before.
Our bilateral ODA does not go to the Government of Uganda, and this financial year is due to increase quite considerably, but it's going to very specific areas of need, such as strengthening health systems, empowering women. We prevented 2.4 million unintended pregnancies through family planning advice, increased modern contraceptive use by 5.7%, supported 600,000 women to access electricity through Get Fit, our renewable energy programme. And crucially, as I said earlier, funding grassroots efforts to shift attitudes on gender-based violence, engaging women's rights groups to defend against discrimination. Our ODA programmes are constantly under review, but I do think that it's important that we continue to support those kind of efforts within Uganda and other countries in sub-Saharan Africa where we are seeing a regression on LGBTQ rights.
Lords, the government of Uganda is a member of the Commonwealth, as are so many other nations which have, unfortunately, very similar policies. The Commonwealth Charter, as has been mentioned, commits Uganda to compliance with international human rights laws, in particular relating to equality. So will the Minister and his department do what they can to ensure that this important topic is put on the agenda for the next Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, which is in Samoa in October?
I thank the Noble Lord for that very important point. I spoke to the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth on this subject, and we have agreed to continue to discuss this in the lead-up to CHOGM, and we want to make sure that human rights and the very values that underpin the Commonwealth are reflected in the work of that very important meeting.
Third oral question, Lord Holmes of Richmond.